Hey there. Hope you're doing well today. Um, we're going to be talking with Ann Zog. Hey there. Hope you all are doing well. Hey Ann, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Not too shabby. Welcome to Woodturners Worldwide Weekend Conversations.
Thanks.
All right. Hey, let me set the stage for those who are joining in, and then we will get rocking. Welcome to Woodturners Worldwide Weekend Conversation Series. This is our 30th interview we've done over the last several months. And the purpose behind the series is to build our community. Here on Instagram and social media, you see a lot of photos of people's work and videos, but we don't always get a chance to get to know the human behind the work. So that is the goal of this conversation here today. I've got the pleasure of meeting with Ann Zog. She is a wood turner living in Chicago, and I'm going to ask her to introduce herself to do a little bit better job, but welcome, Ann. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Well, please do. Tell us a little bit about who you are outside of wood turning. We'll get to that, but who are you as a human? Tell us a little bit about you.
Cool. Well, my name is Ann. I grew up in Indianapolis. I've been in Chicago for maybe close to 20 years.
Mhm.
Got three kids. They're 11, 9, and my son is turning 8 on Monday. And I don't know what else.
You got a busy house.
Yeah.
That's what you got, right? Yeah, we've got three kids over here at the Shaw House, and I know you got some busyness going.
Right, right.
Yeah. Um, do you live in downtown Chicago? What area of Chicago do you live?
I live in Old Town.
Old
So,
Town.
yeah, I'm like the first neighborhood north of the big buildings.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. I used to live in Naperville, which is a far western suburb. But
No kidding.
all right. Um, so you were born in Indianapolis. I was born in Greenfield, by the way. um, tell, tell us a little bit about your childhood. What was that like for you, Ann? And what types of things did you and your family do?
I mean, it was a typical childhood of, in the 80s. Like we
Mhm.
rode bikes, played in the neighborhood, played kickball with the neighbors. I'd leave on my bike in the morning and, promise to be home by dinner.
Right.
Um, just pretty standard for that time. My family and I don't know what
Hmm.
was a runner
Mhm.
in grade school and high school. I ran track. I was a sprinter. Um, Played some other sports, but I'm not real coordinated with the, like ball sports.
Mhm.
Never
Right. The
so,
dribbling, all
so
that
well
stuff.
to those.
Right. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. But I mean, it was a pretty basic, childhood for that time.
Hmm. How many siblings do you got?
I got one sister. She's older than me by 4 years.
Uh-huh.
She and I fought like cats and dogs until maybe she started high school, and then we became friends, and we've been friends ever since.
Isn't that how it works?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you there. So take us to wood turning. What was the very first time you discovered wood turning? And take us to that moment and describe it if you could.
Sure. So I have a friend who is an artist, and she does all sorts of stuff. Right now, she's doing pottery, but she paints. Um, you name it, she's done it. And she got into wood carving, which I had no interest in. And but on my birthday, this was probably, let's see, 3 years ago, maybe. Um, she bought me like a block of wood, and she's like, "We're gonna carve a spoon."
Hmm.
And so she had like a little bandsaw, and we carved the shape and we carved out the spoon. And I never like I'm more right brained, I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't really consider myself like an artist or really even on the creative side, but I made something that looked like what it was supposed to look like. Like, then that was the first time really that
Yeah. That moment was powerful, right?
yes, it was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is actually a spoon.
Right, right.
And so anyway, so I got into it. I'm like, I really, I like doing this. And she has a studio. And so, I went over there. I'm like, I'm going to carve like something, like a big block of wood. I'm just going to carve it. And it was like, took forever.
Forever, right. Yeah.
And so, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to make this nightlight for one of my kids, which would have been kind of like a dome, and I was going to carve out stars and then put a light, and then it would shine the stars on the ceiling. So I was describing it to her, and I'm like, I want to make this dome that's, upside down. She's like, okay, that's a bowl, and why don't you look at using a lathe?
Right.
I had never heard the word before. I asked her how to spell it so I could look it up. And, I watched maybe 10 seconds of somebody working on a lathe, and I was like, that's what I want to do.
That's the stuff.
Yeah. And I'd never heard of it. I'd never seen one. I'd never, watched anybody use it, but I just knew that I would like it.
Yep.
So I ordered a lathe.
What was the first lathe you ordered?
I got the Jet. I think it was like 1221.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, I didn't even know wood turning was like a thing, like with, like that people got interviewed about wood turning, or they gave demos, or, there were professional, well-known wood turners.
Right.
It was just like I taught myself how to knit, I'm like, I just figure out how to use this lathe. And so I spent a year, trying to figure it out.
Humbly bumbling along, right? Yeah.
Which I shared pretty publicly on social media. So if anybody's been following me for a while, they'll remember those days.
We'll talk about the social media journey as well a little bit later on. But so what I heard you say, to recap, is you started off carving spoons, and then you had an idea, and it really matched more of a wood turner's journey. So you picked up a lathe and you got rocking. Take us down to that early journey of where you were kind of trying things out, learning on your own. At what point did you say, you know what, maybe I'll explore, some education, or how did you expand on that early skill set?
Well, I just jumped in, and I knew that a roughing gouge was called a roughing gouge. So I thought, oh, well, this is probably something that I would, use to rough stuff out. I used that. The first thing I made was like a cup or a pencil holder. I just took the log the way that it was, and I think I did the whole thing with a roughing gouge. So you can imagine the catch and whatnot. And, I started posting stuff, and I would get a lot of feedback. And that's like where I started learning, except I got a lot of like conflicting advice.
Right.
Like, hold it underhand, hold it overhand. Like, I didn't know that like wood had a grain pattern. Like, I didn't know that you needed to sharpen your tools like the same every time.
Right.
I really didn't know anything. So after spending a year, and I made stuff. I mean, I made bowls. I had a show at a local store. I sold my work. I mean, I sanded the heck out of it.
Right.
I was doing things, but I just, basically I was, online one day, and I saw Ashley Harwood posted, like, classes are posted, sign up if you want. And, I just thought, well, I didn't know I was as bad as I was,
You were right there in the moment, right? So
yeah. Like at that point, I didn't know that I didn't know anything. I thought I knew some things. But I thought, well, this is, it was a 3-day class, and it just seemed like it was like put in front of me right at the right moment. And so I signed up for that. And that's when my wood turning really changed in terms of like, you know, skill and speed and, you know, that type of stuff.
Yeah. So is that in that 3 day learning session where you really kind of thought, you know what, there's easier way to do things. There's ways that I can hold the gouge that can kind of reduce catches and like all the stuff that anybody who starts off experiences. You were learning how to avoid that.
Yeah, and I was also learning, and I think this is the most valuable thing that I learned was that there's like a process. You know, you do this and then you do that. I mean, I would go outside and then I get kind of bored with the outside and I'd go to the inside and I'd get kind of bored with that and I'd go back to the outside. So I didn't have like a method. I just would wing it every time.
Right.
And so like the way my brain organizes is it was like, oh, okay, you know, first I do this, then I do this, then I do this. And that really helped me, you know, to improve and
To get a sequence of steps, right?
yeah,
To kind of understand, okay, if I do this first, then it'll lead to next and blah, blah, blah. But I can understand how creating some parameters around your work helped out a bit.
right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, you know, after about, let's see, that was in January. 5 months after that, I took a class with Stuart Batty. Again, I think it was a 2-day class, but I took his class more as, you know, I learned so much in the first class, too much for where I was at.
Yeah.
I went home and you know, I turned for thousands of hours. Like I just turned and turned and turned. And I took his class because I wanted to see where along the line I had made up my own,
Right.
whatever, rules or technique.
Right.
Just sort of a fine tuning. And, you know, and that was really helpful. And I found out that like I really was doing things pretty well. You know, aside from a couple pointers that he gave me. But yeah, between those two classes, you know, I pretty much got down what I needed to learn about bowl turning.
Got you. So once you put together the rudimentary skills, you put in the hours, right? Because it really does take that spending hundreds and thousands of hours at the lathe to just get good and refine your skills.
Yeah.
Once you started to kind of put things together, at what point did you start thinking beyond bowls, or have you thought beyond bowls like consistently at any point?
So I turned bowls mostly for a couple years, 2 years. And then I started helping Stuart teach classes, and there, usually on the last day, there would be kind of a different project.
Right.
And that's when I started learning, you know, like at that point, I just needed to know the steps, like to make a box. Like I could do all the cuts.
Right.
I just didn't know, like, well, what do I do the lid first? Do I cut, you know? And so I learned those steps from him. I'm not really great at watching YouTube videos and like I usually want to know one very specific thing, and I don't want to watch like a 1 hour video to possibly
Just to get that one thing.
yeah, maybe not even get it.
Right.
So having like a person where it's like, because usually what happens is I'll watch it, if I even watch it, and then I'll get to the lathe and I'll have a question that wasn't covered.
Right.
And so working with, you know, and I learn by doing more than listening or watching. So having him there just to say, okay, you know, what about like this little thing? I learned the processes of a lot of, you know, I learned boxes. I learned platters. I'm trying to think. Oh, vases was just spindle turning, which I didn't really learn specifically how to turn a vase, but you know, I knew all the cuts, and there's not, you know, a vase can look like anything. I mean, a box needs to look like a box.
Right.
So that was just me fiddling around, you know, kind of trying something. But I guess with bowls, I just got a little tired of doing the exact same thing over and over. And so the vases, Well, also I was told like in order to be a good turner or a good bowl turner, I needed to be a good spindle turner. And I didn't ever do that because when I thought of spindles, I thought of the things in your stairs.
Sure.
And I'm like, I don't want to make that for starters. And I also don't want to make something repeatable like that.
Yeah, the same thing over and over. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, with like, it feels stressful to be like, oh God, like I cut that a little too much and it doesn't match.
Right.
So bases seemed like a good place to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I went to next. And then I started doing boxes, and I've only done a few platters, but.
Yeah, very cool. So that kind of speaks to your progression a bit as you've kind of mastered different techniques, and then you started thinking, okay, so what's next? I can then apply that. So as you think about, your journey, you've taken classes with a couple different folks, but has there been any group or anyone who's really been an inspiration where you're like, you know what, I learned quite a bit from that individual, or that looks cool, let me try that? Anything like that?
I mean, like I said, I didn't watch a lot of stuff. I mean, I wouldn't watch anything longer than an Instagram post that was a minute.
Right.
So in terms of early, inspiration or influences, like I didn't even know there were people to be inspired by.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, it was more like images that I liked, like I'd be more inspired by like, oh, that's a beautiful bowl that someone made. I want to make something that looks beautiful.
Yeah.
But I mean, Ashley was the first person I went to. I was thinking back to it. She might have been really the first person that I knew that was teaching. I did try to take a class here in Chicago at like the Chicago woodworking school. It's not wood turning. It covers a bunch of stuff, and the class was canceled because there was a low sign up.
Was that before COVID, or?
Oh yeah, that was before even the class I took with Ashley.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah, I did try to do that. It was like once a week for maybe a couple of hours, but I might have been the only person that signed up, and so they canceled the class. And then she was the next like class that was put in front of me.
Yeah.
So she helped me a lot, and then people would suggest Stuart's videos. Oh, he's the best, he's the master, whatever. And I looked at them; they were like 2 hours. I'm like,
you're like, who's got time for that? I got 3 kids, right? I actually want to do wood turning, not watch. Yeah.
Right. It was way too long, so I just couldn't really be bothered. But I knew in my mind, like his name was in my head, as somebody that knew what they were doing. And I didn't actually think he was even teaching anymore. He's not very visible. But I Googled his name one night, and there happened to be a class he was teaching in Indiana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So proximity, it worked out.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of move us to less about your journey and more about like, where do you get your wood? So you're in a very urban setting, right?
Yeah.
How do you locate your wood, and where do you store it?
Occasionally there is like a storm and a tree down, and I have a chainsaw, and I'll go and cut up some pieces and put them in my car. I also go to local landscapers. There's one in particular that lets me come. They don't let me use my saw, so I have to take what I can carry, which
Right.
Some of the stuff is really heavy and big.
Right. Yeah.
So I take what I can get. So I go there. But I mean, between those two places, I also started buying wood, which obviously is anyone can source if you're willing to buy the wood. But yeah, mostly the green wood is just from landscapers or storms in the area.
Yep. Yep. Do you have a favorite wood that you turn?
I don't. I'm starting to turn, like a lot of times I don't know what the wood is because I'm just taking it. I have like an app that will identify like leaves of the tree. But even then it's kind of a crapshoot whether or not that's accurate. But when I'm going to the landscaping place, it's just wood. So for a while I would like identify what I thought it was. And then if it looked like that, I would think it was the same. But if I was wrong from the start, then I was wrong.
Right. Yeah, I gotcha.
But I mean, I like turning almost everything. I don't love pine because it's sticky.
Hmm.
But other than that, I'll turn almost, any wood that I can find that's not too soft.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, what's is there? So as you've started to purchase timber, it, obviously that opens up a whole world of opportunity and selection. Do you find that you lean towards exotics, or is it really just more of the U.S. type of timber that you source out?
Well, I lean toward the exotics because I can't find them.
Hmm.
They're also smaller pieces. I have bought some bigger blanks. I got some pre-cord bowls from, I think it's called a cut above.
Hmm.
That's all. Where they cord out, so you get maybe three out of the blank. I've
I
done,
think that's Kirk DeHeer's son,
yeah,
out in Utah. Yeah,
yeah.
well, actually, we spoke with Kirk last week. Yeah,
Oh, nice. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, the quality of those blanks are great.
Hmm.
So I bought that in terms of big stuff, but the other stuff I've been buying just small, really just to see what it is. I mean, I'm not
Right.
that familiar with a bunch of different woods, so what it looks like, how it turns, do I like it? But I've been making boxes out of those or vases,
Hmm.
just little ones. So I'm not spending too much money on each blank just to kind of figure out,
Right.
like, do I like this?
Right. You're not having full trees show up at your doorstep. Is that what you're saying, Ann?
Not yet.
You're right. Yeah.
I,
What do you do with all the things you make?
I sell them.
You sell them.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you sell them through a website? Do you sell them through a local store? How does that work for you?
Both. I have a store in Chicago that I sell. There's a store in Wisconsin that I sell at, and then the rest of it, I moved online because I was only selling at a store in Chicago.
Yeah.
Um, every year, just after Thanksgiving, that would be kind of when I would bring all the inventory. We'd have what we were calling a show where I would be there and, they might have a little bar with drinks and, they'd stay open late. And it was a lot of fun and I'd sell a lot of pieces. But when the pandemic hit, retail really
Hmm.
was not a great option for me to sell my work. So I posted everything online
Hmm.
um, and sold a lot that way. I haven't been, it's like I want to turn wood. I don't want to make a website. I don't want to, spend the time like editing pictures and doing all that.
That's right.
So I do it like in bunches. Like once I get enough, then I'll spend, the day updating the website. But I haven't had like a big inventory since Christmas and then
Hmm.
build it up.
Got you. Okay. That makes sense. So you've kind of evolved with as the pandemic revealed itself, but at the same time you've diversified in some ways your approach to probably manage volume, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many hours a day do you typically turn at this point, if it's daily?
Well, it's Monday through Friday. I stay
Hmm.
home, I'm with my kids on the weekends. When they're at school, I turn when they're at school. So
Hmm.
that's like, say, 9 to 3.
Hmm.
Summertime, it's less, maybe, I mean, it's 4 days a week, if that. And then it's more like, 10 to 3 or 11 to 3. Um,
Yep.
but if I have something else to do, then it takes into that.
Got you. That makes sense. I think what many woodturners who turn several hours a day bump into is, what do you do with all the shavings? You can only put so much in your garden. So how do you deal with it?
Well, we do have a garden in my studio, so I'll put it there and I just throw it away.
Hmm. You just bulk it out, huh?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Makes sense. Um, Let me ask you this. Let's talk a little bit about social media. Social media can be it can be a positive. Obviously, there can be some challenges with it. Did you start off with a social media strategy, or did it just evolve over time? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Sure. No, I did not have a strategy.
Hmm.
Basically, I had a small personal social media account, and when I got into wood turning, I got kind of obsessed obsessed with it, you know, like I wanted to talk, you know, what I just wanted to, you know, I guess if I was going to post something, I wanted to post something about that, but I didn't want to bore everybody, like all my friends. So
Right.
I created a separate account really just to, you know, I was sort of using it as a, you know, like a scrapbook, I guess, for myself where I could go back and look at the pictures.
Yep.
But then I discovered that there is a community of wood turners that are, for the most part, very kind and helpful and, you know, generous with their time. And so that's when the account changed to be more of a resource for myself and for others. Like I would post things and then I would get, like I said, like a ton of people commenting on, you know, whatever it was that I was doing. And so it would become like kind of a discussion about, I don't know, how to rough out a bowl or whatever. And yeah, so I mean, I just posted a lot of mistakes, really, is what I did.
Was that a conscious choice? Because I think with that, I mean, I can say it clearly. You probably withstood a fair amount of mansplaining. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah. Well, some of it I did. You know, it was helpful. You know, mansplaining or just explaining. You know, some of it was valuable to me, but as I got better, it became less valuable, I guess.
Yeah. So as you juggled that, right, you were asking questions, and it sounds like you asked those questions to help answer something that you needed answered, right, on your journey, which makes perfect sense. But it was also beneficial to others. You got varying degrees of response. Some of it was helpful, some of it wasn't. How do you balance all of that, though? You know, information coming your way that you sought, but sometimes it's just, you know, it's wrong. How do you deal with that?
I mean, I would just try what people had suggested. I mean, the hard thing was I didn't know if somebody was a, you know, professional wood turner or somebody that's never turned anything in their life that's just deciding to chime in. You know, people, surprisingly to me, really would also comment on other people's comments, like, oh, no, don't, you know, so there would be a discussion going on between multiple people. And, you know, at the end of the day, I would just try out what made sense to me. And if it worked, but that's why I ended up taking a class, because it was, like I said, I didn't have a process.
Right.
It was just so much, like people assumed, I think, that I had a starting baseline of knowledge with wood, but I really didn't. So some of it was kind of out of context, you know, or too advanced maybe for where I was, or
So I think what I hear you saying is you may have asked a question, you may have received an answer, you tried out a lot of different things, but maybe because at that point in your journey you didn't have the context, the foundational stuff. There might be aspects of the response that, you know, there was holes in your game, right? So, you know, I mean, that created its own challenge, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I really needed was to spend a couple of days with somebody that knew what they were doing. But I did the best I could with all the information. Yeah,
absolutely. So, you know, thinking about, and you've been wood turning for how long? How many years?
3.
Okay, so 3 years. So imagine that there's another Anne out there. She is just now starting her wood turning journey. What would you tell that Anne? What's some advice you'd give her?
I would tell her to take a class.
Take a class.
You know, it would have saved me a year and also a lot of money, because I also would think to myself, like, you know, like this roughing gouge isn't hollowing the bowl like how it looks like everyone else is doing it. So it must, I guess I need another tool, you know? And so I would buy, I mean, I have one tool. I've never even used it since, but the video showed, you know, the shavings just curl out. I never really figured out how to use that one either. Now I don't need it. But I mean, really, I just need 3 tools I need a lathe. I need some wood. I need a grinder. But I bought a lot of stuff thinking, oh, this is what I need. I'll be better if I get this.
So take a class. It'll save you time, probably some frustration. It'll save you some money. It's a good investment up front.
Yeah, I think so.
Have you, have you, hold on, I got to block this guy right here. I don't do that often, but anytime in the comments someone's using racial slurs, we're just going to box those people out. Let me ask this. When we think about wood turning, generally it's an older person's gig, right? But it's really starting to diversify a great deal, and with diversity comes all sorts of new ideas and different ways of doing things. How important is it for you to have women in wood turning, and to be able to be a presence for others to see that, hey, you know what, this is a place for me?
How important is it to me? I mean, whenever I'm, helping out with a class, I always like to see a woman there. In terms of its importance, I don't know. I'm not really sure how important that is to me. I mean, I enjoy the people that would turn. They seem to be like a kind, gentle group of people. Whether they're men or women, I don't know if it really matters to me. I guess just in terms of it opening up to women, like just in people's minds, like, oh, women can do this too. Of course that, I have an interest in that, but when I started, I didn't know it was mostly men, which, was maybe a good thing. Maybe if I thought men do this, I wouldn't have, felt comfortable just jumping in.
Sure. Yeah. So the fact that you entered in just from a point of curiosity kind of eradicated all of those concerns or any of that type of stuff, because your journey was just unique to you.
Yeah, I didn't have a preconceived idea of like, this is the stereotype of person that does this. I mean, I guess I would like to tell women that like women can do it. I also was brought up just to believe that like it didn't matter if I was a woman or a man, like I could just do, whatever I was interested in. But I mean, it's definitely not, I mean, it's like a power tool, I guess, but it's not intimidating. It's not, it's more feminine to me. It's actually, the less you do, the better the cut is. Like, you don't need to be strong and, power through. I'm not cutting the wood with my force. It's just the sharp tool that's doing it. So I'm surprised more women don't do it, because really it is more delicate, I think, than, I don't know, maybe some other things that involve power tools.
Sure. You started with a lathe that was a 1221, a jet, and then you've moved on since then. What do you work on now?
I work on a Powermatic. I have the 2020B, but I bought an extension, which was a little longer than I really need and have space for.
Right.
But it was available. I was asking Christian over at Woodworkers Emporium, if he had anything, and he did, and that's what he had. So I have that also, which for a while I was just using as a very expensive tailstock holder.
Right. Place to line up all your gouges and stuff.
Exactly.
Right.
With the 2020B, you really have to take the tailstock off to turn to get it out of your elbow, and it's heavy. And it takes a little bit of precision to get it back in. And so, for a while it was just so nice to be able to push the tailstock back. But now I've been doing, some hollow forms and some other things that require the length more than when I started with bowls.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Tell us about your family. So when you went down the wood turning rabbit hole, you became probably passionate, maybe even obsessed. Um, what did your spouse and your kids, what did they have to say once they saw this new energy coming from you?
Um, well, my kids, I mean, they thought it was great. It was because I would kind of come home with something and it was like, oh, can I have that bowl? And,
Hmm.
I didn't sell my stuff for a while. So I was just really starting to cover every surface with bowls.
Yep.
And they were at school. So
Hmm.
um, they enjoyed it, I guess.
Hmm.
My spouse, I don't know. I mean, he's definitely been supportive. It was the first time since we had kids that I had an interest of something that was like just mine.
Yeah.
So there's probably a little bit of an adjustment there.
Hmm.
But he goes to work, my kids go to school, and I go do this. So it really doesn't interfere. Although sometimes it's like, some things because I love it so much.
Hmm.
I want to be doing it all the time. So, I would much rather wood turn than go get shampoo at Target or whatever.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And so sometimes that stuff gets like pushed until like, we're like filling it with water and trying,
Right, right.
before.
Get that last little bit out of it, right?
Yeah. So some of that stuff can slide a little bit because it's just, I would much rather be turning than, loading the dishwasher or
Hmm.
doing most things, to be honest with you. So, sometimes that can happen, but for the most part, it's pretty balanced. Like, I don't
That's cool.
think it affects anybody's look.
I guess my original question and maybe the follow up is: do any of them ever like do they get inspired by your passion for it? Is that something that they're like, man, let me try that?
Well, when the world shut down last March or whenever, um, and we were remote learning, I brought my jet over to my garage
Hmm.
and I started teaching them, basically pens they were making. It seemed like
Hmm.
a easy beginner. And it was like you made a pen,
Hmm.
which I think is super cool. And it looks like a, it doesn't look like a kid made a pen. It looks like like a
It
pen.
looks awesome, right? Like a store bought thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I taught them each to do that. I did teach my older one to do some bowl turning, but really I was helping most of the way. I don't want them to get hurt, and we weren't spending tons of time. I mean, they didn't have a lot of patience to like really approach it at the pace that it should have been approached. So I was helping most of the time. Um, but no, they're not that interested in it. But I do think that the fact that they see their mom um, taking something from nothing
Hmm.
that I enjoy and that I've been successful at in different ways, I think that's a good example. Like
Hmm.
maybe more subconsciously than consciously, just having that be a part of their life is something that's normal. I
Yeah.
think is maybe the best gift that it gives them.
Yeah. Constantly being able to see mom engaged in some sort of maker activity, and this is the result of it.
Yeah.
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 Um, how important it is for you that you have that, something that is uniquely yours. You do create things, you do put them out into the world, and they do sit on people's shelves or in their home, and they're useful. Are there any surprises by how much that means to you as an individual?
Um, so I'm not sure what you mean. Like,
Yeah. So to be a maker, what does that mean to you?
it now that I've opened up that creative side of me,
Hmm.
it's very important.
Yeah.
We'll go on vacation or, we spend some time out of town in the summer and, you know, I can feel like the need to express that. Um, and sometimes I can, get it a little bit, like if we're in Wisconsin, I can find wood and cut it up and prep it and bring it home. But it's also like somewhat meditative when I'm turning. I listen to music, but I don't think a lot. I focus on what I'm doing. And I think that's what my body really misses when I'm not turning, is that time where I'm just with myself and it's quiet and I'm focused on what I'm doing. Because otherwise, I mean, I've got 3 kids, so the stimulus is insane.
You got plenty going on. Yeah, I get you.
And so to have that quiet time where I'm not just like sitting in a dark room by myself, where I'm creating something and I'm visually stimulated by it, and also, improving my skills and trying new things, that is very important to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't have it, so I didn't know to miss it.
I'm going to take us to tools real quick, and I'm looking at the clock. These hours pass pretty quick, but folks sometimes have like a full gallery of tools. I can do one tool and do the whole thing and feel perfectly good about it. You mentioned that it's kind of like the same thing with you.
Yeah.
Really only need a couple tools. Is there a specific size of a gouge that you find is just perfect for you?
The 1/2 inch is pretty good, or the 5/8.
5/8, 1/2 inch, yeah.
Yeah.
Say that again?
I'll just go between those sometimes depending on what's out already, what's sharp. I'll usually start with one and just stick with it, or the size of the bowl. I mean, I can take bigger gouge.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Is there a brand that you kind of gravitate towards?
Not really. When I help out with Stuart's class at Woodworkers Emporium, they have a store. And so I'll go in there and ask them to just recommend, what they think the best bowl gouge is if I need one. I think they've been giving me the one way lately, but it's, I put my thumb in the gouge and the sides of it are sharp.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I don't love about that tool. But really, in terms of the gouge, I mean, if it's made of a decent material, usually it's fine. But I do like Stuart Batty's handles.
What is it about their handles? Is it just the size, or the way they're contoured?
Well, they screw on and off, so I can adjust. I just need one gouge, and then I can have multiple handles. So I don't need a bunch of gouges. I just really need one, and that's why I like the handles. I mean, they also feel good in my hand, and the weight and all that is nice. But I just like being able to interchange them when I need something different instead of just buying a bunch.
Same handle, different gouge length or type, and you're able to interchange it throughout.
Well, the opposite, same gouge, different handle.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Huh. Okay. Tell us about like what's ahead for you as you look into the near future. Any plans that you're developing as you continue to broaden your skills and also maybe even sales?
Well, in September, I'm helping out with another bowl turning class. In November, I'm going to help out with a spindle turning class, which I think will be, I've done a lot of bowl turning classes. I've got bowl turning down pretty well. So I think this one will be more for me. Like I'll learn more than I do in a bowl turning class by helping. So I'm looking forward to that because I think I'll really, learn and hear and see some different techniques and cuts that, I just haven't been using.
Sure.
So in terms of teaching, that's what I have ahead. I was doing private lessons in my studio, but with COVID, I mean, it's a pretty small studio and, I've got kids that are not able to be vaccinated. So I have not been doing that. But I would like to start opening that up again because I do enjoy teaching and I have 2 lathes, I guess, but I don't have a school,
Right.
that I have in my basement or whatever. So I do enjoy the private lessons. And in terms of my work, I did separate my work from my process in terms of website and social media account. Because I guess trying to build a brand with my work,
Hmm.
and then maybe, I guess too with my process. Um,
So let me make sure I understood that. So you've got two accounts. One is really like the day in, day out of like maybe videos of like what you're making and the feedback and everything else. And then the other account is more of the finished product and presented in a specific way. Is that accurate?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When it was all one, it just seemed kind of hodgepodge. And, I think that because I was doing videos on my Instagram account for so long, that's what people came for. They didn't really come to buy something.
Hmm.
And I don't really want to sell something to the people on that account, you know?
Right.
Um, and so I created the separate account that would be more, yeah, just my work. I mean, you could either just visually or to buy something, it would all be available. They,
Got you.
I separated those, which, is like a lot of non-wood turning work with two websites. I did meet somebody that has some, I guess, website marketing skills, and we're going to just sort of trade off. Like, he'll teach me a little bit about that, and I'll teach him a little bit about, bull turning if he has any questions. So I'm, looking to dive a little deeper into, like, I don't even know, like SEO something, I don't
No idea.
like search engine optimization. I don't know, like website stuff. Yeah, I can't even like converse about it logically because I don't know the terms. Um, but I am, gonna just to see if I can like get it higher on Google, that type of stuff.
Hmm.
Fiddle around with that. But I am excited about learning more about how to do that.
Got you. So that the more of the marketing, the the presentation aspect of getting your work out there. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah.
makes good sense. So so we've talked about what advice you might have for newer wood turners. We've talked about what's on the horizon for you, some of your aspirations. We've talked about your journey. Are there topics that we haven't touched on that you would like to kind of put on the table before we go?
Not really that I can think of.
Okay. Well, I want to say it was a pleasure to talk with you, Anne. I hope I hope to folks follow you along and are able to watch your journey unfold over time. But it was a pleasure talking with you today.
Yeah, great talking to you too. Thanks.
All right. Well, hey, have a great one.
All right, you too.
All right. Bye bye.